to Contemporary Art Podcast with me, Lisa Fevral. Today we're gonna talk about You. By You I mean the show You from Netflix, the beginning of conceptual art, or what is considered to be the beginning of conceptual art. And we're gonna talk about some music that I'm listening to recently that I think is kind of fun. So I want to share it with you. A few things before we start. So first of all, I'm gonna try and keep my wheezing to a minimum and all my coughing and stuff. But the growth from cancer in the chest is starting to really get to me. It really makes me cough and causes a lot of pain. So I'm gonna try not to, make too much noise and cut it out, but just letting you know that if I seem out of breath, that's why. And I think that I want to start today with a little bit of a different section that we usually start with. Usually we start with art, I guess. It's only 6 episodes, so we don't have a very set sections in terms of which one we start with. We're gonna start with the TV show section.
Will I be nervous if I'm chosen to be on the show? No. Why should I be? I am extremely comfortable being on national television.
So the audio clip that I used in this is from Total Drama Island. I believe it was Island. Yes. It's the tape from Heather, the tape that she sent in to get into the show. If you know, you know. In any case, let's talk about You. So I finished the show yesterday. I was kind of thinking about avoiding the show entirely, to be honest, because recently I've been only exclusively watching things that are extremely wholesome, to be honest. I'm trying to avoid anything that can make me feel sad or uncomfortable. I'm genuinely avoiding everything that could potentially make me feel uncomfortable in any way. And then I realized I saw a few clips of the 3rd season of You on YouTube, and I kind of realized that I forgot that this show is so ridiculous that it doesn't really make you feel the weight of anything that's going on in the show, unless it's very graphic. You can just skip it if you don't want to see it. So I wanted to see what happens, so I was like, okay, I think that I can risk it. It's not gonna be too deep, to make me feel any particular way or reflect anything in any way, really, because it's just so ridiculous that and all the behaviors are so heightened that it's gonna be okay, I think. So that's what I did. I finished the show in a couple of days. Just as expected, Joe is annoying. He's always been annoying. Just so frustrating because as much as I don't like Love, I don't like her. Obviously she's a murderer, of course I don't like her. Joe without her is just unbearable. At this point, I think that the 1st season I was kind of finding him more amusing than I do now, mostly because his dialogue was kind of fresh in terms of the conflicting narration that's going on in his head and what he's actually doing. Now, even when he's being somewhat self-aware here and there, it's not really doing it for me, because it was kind of entertaining for 1 season, and then in the 2nd season there were still entertaining parts. I feel like the writers are doing a really good job of making this show extremely entertaining. It's not something that you watch that will make you feel like you're confronting something about a human condition or something like that. It's not a deep show, and I'm really happy that it isn't, because it's kind of scratching an itch of wanting some kind of mystery or watching something that is revolving around people trying to catch each other. There's a lot of funky business going on, but you don't really get that much heavy stuff. I don't know, everything is handled in a very light way, or maybe it's just I find all the characters so ridiculous that I don't relate to them at all, and it makes it a lot easier to not get affected by the show entirely. I kind of enjoy watching it, even though I've been exclusively watching cartoons, children's cartoons recently, just to not make myself upset in any type of way. I feel like this show didn't make me feel upset at all, just because I don't root for anybody there. Everyone there annoys me. For example, Theo is young and he definitely doesn't deserve what happens in the show. Don't worry, that's not a spoiler. I'm not telling you what happens to him. Actually, you know what? If you don't want spoilers, maybe skip this part because I don't control myself well when it comes to spoilers in general, because I don't find them to be a big deal, and I just keep on talking without thinking of what has been released, of what is just an opinion and what is an actual spoiler. Theo, even though he is sweet and he doesn't deserve anything that happens to him or anything like that, he's not majorly flawed. He's just so stupid and spoiled that you just don't like feel like relating to him, like just such a horny boy to a fault, you know. And that's about it, honestly. Love, it's a little bit confusing because her conversation with Joe at the end, first of all, yes, they are soulmates. Joe and Love, they're definitely worth each other, but Joe is like obsessed with the idea that he's better than he actually is, and that, I don't know, he's idealizing this women to the point where they become this character, and if they don't do what the character was supposed to do in his head, he gets violent towards them and thinks that they deserve to die and that or at least that he deserves somebody else, where it's a little strange considering that he's literally the same as Love, but he sees himself as so much better, I guess, or he just doesn't allow women to be humans in some kind of way. Like, it's just such a strange thing, and I mean it's very hypocritical of him, and it is incredibly familiar to real life, where your behavior is kind of vilified a lot more by the male population in a really weird way. But he's just so strange to me. Like, I get that he's not learning, and kind of like I wouldn't expect that. I actually would be a little bit pissed if Joe became kind of a good person, because you don't become a good person after doing things like that, you know. Like, he's done enough for him to not be redeemable. I just think that I was hoping that Love would give him a harder time. I feel like she's capable of more than having this rushed kind of ending. And also, I'm not gonna lie, having a new cast every season except for Joe is tiring. I was kind of really excited that we got to keep at least one character from the previous season with Love, you know. Of course her mother was also in the previous season, whatever, but I meant like more of the people who were recurring a lot more. It's just annoying, to be honest, to always have to have Joe as the anchor to the cast. I'm just saying that, like, he's not entertaining enough anymore for him to be the anchor. I feel like from first to second season they kind of worked, but then from second to third I feel like Love was the anchor that kind of made you want to see more of the show. If it was just Joe and Love was already gone from second season to third, I would probably not return to watch the third season because it would be a little bit too similar, I guess. And now that he's in Paris at the end, I'm like, I don't know how to feel about it, because it doesn't really make me want to see any more of this show, just because, again, everyone's gone except for Joe, and who gives a shit about Joe, honestly? Like, who wants to keep looking at this guy? At least his dynamic with Love was a little bit more interesting, because she is just like him and she could really stand up to him to compare to all the other women that he was obsessed with, or people that he keyworded. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just was a little bit more interesting when she was around, because the novelty of the first season cannot be stretched out anymore, you know. If the second season was exactly like the first one and Love was exactly like Beck, it would be incredibly boring. So considering that they have managed to create something really interesting, entertaining, you know, it's an entertaining show. It's not a deep show. It's not a very well thought out show that changes your whole entire world, but it's a very entertaining show. And I can appreciate that for 3 seasons they managed to create some kind of bridge between the seasons, that you wanted to come back for more, and they managed to keep it somewhat interesting in terms of nothing like repeating itself that much. Do you know what I mean? But now I'm curious to see how they're gonna get themselves out of this hole, out of not having Love anymore, having to come up with something new for Joe, because if he's just gonna be walking around looking for Marianne and being his Joey self, it's just not gonna be interesting, and I'm curious what they're gonna do with that, to be honest. So I think that this show is basically just you hating a bunch of characters. At least I hate most of them, if not all of them, and then just kind of watching for the fun of it. Like, it's entertaining. That's what it is, basically. If you haven't seen it and you like something weird, dramatic, with a bit of humor, it's a bit violent, so if you don't like that, don't watch it. In any case, Today, I wanted to talk to you about the time when conceptual art started, in quotations. Of course, history is a little bit strange. It prefers to pick specific dates and specific artworks and specific artists that created a movement or that started a new thing, but oftentimes it's not really the case. So I'm always saying that it's in quotations just because I don't feel like giving one artist all of the praise or the entirety of the credit, because there's oftentimes a bunch of people who were working around them in the same lane or people who they took ideas from. It's a little bit muddy most of the time. In this case, we're going to be talking about Marcel Duchamp, and I wouldn't say that there's any evidence that there was somebody else who's done the same thing or not. I wasn't researching specifically to disprove anything or prove anything, but whenever I'm going to be presenting artists to you and saying that they started something or they were pivotal in some kind of way to the art movements, usually I mean it in a loose kind of way because history is always going to be muddy. So let's move to this art section just so we could talk in depth about it.
Yeah, she's a full-on Monet. It's like the painting, see? From far away it's okay, but up close it's a big old mess.
So, why I want to talk about Marcel Duchamp is because if you want to know anything about conceptual art or contemporary art, you're gonna have to know this name just because it is referenced so often. And the terms that he kind of coined are referenced so much as well that if you know his work, it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand a lot of conceptual art, and especially a lot of contemporary conceptual art, which is in some ways the same thing. We're kind of in this conceptual art era. A lot of the time people don't really understand what conceptual art means, and they're like, what? Concept is an idea, just your idea is the art, is that what it is? And it's like, kinda actually. So in the past, for many centuries, art was very representational. We're not really talking about modern art, the start of modern art, because the start of modern art happened in the mid-19th century. Today we're going to be talking about a very specific artist, which is Marcel Duchamp, and very specific work, which is his fountain work from 1917. It's a very famous artwork. The type of thoughts that I have on it depend on the day. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, that was good. Sometimes I wake up and I think, ugh, how stupid is that? Basically, that's kind of my feelings on art in general. Every day I feel differently about it, but specifically in the past, art was very representational, and we kind of expected that artists are people who paint or sculpt. They do something very specific skill-wise, and they are oftentimes considered to be good artists when they are good at that specific skill. So somebody who would draw and then paint representationally in the best way would be considered to be the best artist. Nowadays, you have probably noticed when you went to galleries or you heard about them or you heard about art that kind of gets viral or something like that, that a lot of art is not representational. It is weird objects at a gallery. It could be literally anything, and it kind of all started with Duchamp, because obviously there were other people who were working at the same time doing kind of similar things, but what Duchamp created was the idea of ready-made. And ready-made, what it is basically art that's manufactured, or art that is a found object. So you don't actually make the object, you usually find an object. So for example, the work that we're going to be talking about today, Fountain, it was basically a urinal. So Marcel just found a urinal, he put it on its head, just like, or like on its side, basically just flipped it in some kind of odd way, put it on a pedestal as like a sculpture, wrote a name, which was R.Mutt, as like the name of the artist on the piece. That was kind of it basically. So it's just a urinal on its side and it's named Fountain. What this type of art does is, especially, nowadays, when we're so used to anything being art, this type of work wouldn't be revolutionary. It wouldn't be important. It wouldn't even be good, to be honest, because just putting a urinal on its side and then calling it a fountain, in this world where we expect things to be whatever the artist is saying they are, it's really not that interesting. But in the past, where even drawing things not in a non-representational way was already kind of strange, I guess people were already doing it. That's true. People were already doing it. It's 1917. Obviously, surrealists are his buddies, Marcel's buddies. Abstraction is a thing. Obviously, people know about these things, but it was still quite common to paint in some representational form, or at least make the objects yourself, not find objects and then manipulate them in some kind of way to make them symbolize something else and then call it a day, right? What's interesting about this specific work is that it is the easiest way to explain to people what conceptual art is. When someone doesn't understand what is conceptual art, you can always explain it with a fountain. Yes, it could be anything. You could just take a urinal and put it on its side and then call it a fountain. But the fact of the matter is, conceptual contemporary art is usually about the artist doing the thinking about the piece, not necessarily having to make everything from scratch themselves, because the skill becomes less important to compare to your thinking skill. So if you've had your painting skill as your most important part about your work, you would probably do things that are extremely representational, for example, to show off how well you could represent reality, or you would do some kind of innovation in painting realm, right? With conceptual art, your medium is, or your skill is not the most important thing. What's important is your ideas. So your ideas and your concepts can shape your career. You could be a good painter and you could be a very skilled painter and you could be painting representational art if it is the best way to deliver your idea, and you would still be a conceptual artist because your idea is best represented with this specific skill, so kind of use them together to talk about your ideas. If your ideas are not as important to you as your skill, then you are more of a skill-based artist. It's more of a classic kind of idea of what an artist is before modern art was created. Oftentimes it's also explained as conceptual art is more about the artist choosing what's in the art piece rather than creating the art piece, which is not entirely true, because in some ways it is true in some artworks, but I don't think that it's necessary for conceptual art to be found objects, because found objects is specifically for ready-made art. So if someone tells you that this is ready-made art, they actually do mean that this is a found object that's been manipulated in some way and named somehow and put in a gallery or put in a space that kind of puts it in context of art. And if someone tells you that it's conceptual art, it doesn't necessarily mean that they just found this object. They could have made it. But honestly, it used to be an interesting conversation when I just started learning about art. The conversation of, who is the artist? Is it the person who made the urinal at the factory? Is it the person who created the design for it? Is it the person who, finished it and polished it? Is it the artist that picked that object and put it on a pedestal and named it and framed it in a different way? Technically, the urinal was created by those people to be a urinal, and then Marcel Duchamp chose it as an object for its signifier qualities. Oftentimes conceptual art, a lot of it is about semiotics, to be honest, I'm not gonna lie. A lot of conceptual art is like that. You take meaning of objects and you manipulate the object until it feels like it has a different meaning, because it is, for example, non-functional as the object that it's supposed to be. And then you suggest a new meaning or an intended meaning of the artist, right, through the title of the work. So the title of the work all of a sudden became more important too. It used to be just a description or just for convenience. So for example, if it's a painting of, Jesus or something like that, you would just name it such for it to be easier to talk about, to reference. But it wasn't part of the viewing experience of the artwork. It's not necessary to read it. You could see what's going on in there. With conceptual art, oftentimes the name is very important. So when you would go to a gallery and you see a strange object as an artwork, I would tell you that the easiest way to engage with it as a viewer would be to look at the name, because sometimes it's something stupid like untitled whatever and it doesn't really tell you anything, but sometimes it's a part of the experience, and sometimes it gives you a clue as to why these objects were placed together and why they're made into this sculpture, or why they've been deconstructed in some kind of way, you know? That's why it's important to talk about Marcel Duchamp and conceptual art, because he's technically considered to be the father of conceptual art, because he switched this relationship between the artist and the object as more of a artist as chooser rather than maker. But I would say that modern art in general was already doing a lot of experimentation that led there. It's really interesting that we're so used to this idea of anything, any object, or even luck thereof being an artwork or being considered an artwork, that to us this type of artwork, we're just kind of confused as to why people are making a big deal out of it, right? Why is Marcel Duchamp known for this fountain work? It's just like any contemporary artwork nowadays, but it's because it was one of the first ones that created this type of relationship between the artist and the artwork and the viewer. And I think that there's definitely a lot of shitty artworks that kind of came out of this whole idea of anything being art. There's definitely a lot of artists who don't put a lot of effort into anything, and they're kind of useless, to be honest. But it also created a new relationship with art that makes a lot more sense for the modern world. Most of all, it challenged the way that the artists were making art back then. There's a lot of stupid things about artists, though. I'm gonna complain about artists all the time. I am part of the group, so I'm gonna be complaining about myself at the same time too. But one of the things about Marcel is that there's literally a quote about him being like, you can't really explain electricity. Oh, you can't really there's no definition for electricity, or something like that. Actually, let me find that quote exactly, because that made me laugh so much, because it's just ridiculous. The quote that I was going to tell you is, you cannot define electricity. The same can be said of art. It is a kind of inner current in a human being, or something which needs no definition. First of all, sir, yes, you can define electricity. It's been defined. I even checked, because I was like, okay, well, maybe in his time, electricity wasn't defined per se. Maybe it was just used very, I don't know, in a very strange way where people didn't really define it. I looked it up and realized that no, people did define it by that point already. So I don't know what he's talking about. This is such an artist thing to say. You cannot define electricity, and it's the same with art. Sir, you can define electricity. That's why you can use it in your home, because somebody figured out what it is and can define it. I cannot with artists, honestly. It's just so strange. In any case, enough of art history for today. We're gonna actually come back to him a couple of times, or to some of his works, because as I told you, he kind of comes up here and there in art history in general, and I don't want it to be too lectury, so I'm not going to be, fitting a lot of dates in and try to be very precise about describing him and his work and whatever. I just want to talk about him in terms of how he fits into art history, and why you should probably know him, just for the sake of having a really easy time identifying and understanding some of the artworks in the galleries that you're gonna see. Let's move on to music section today, because I feel like talking about some music that I've been listening to.
What? Are they insane? How are we supposed to survive without any tune?
I've probably talked about it already on Twitter, and I think I've talked about it on my channel too, in the video that I made about this group, aespa. I've been obsessed with aespa lately. It's ridiculous. I keep on watching their, what is called, camera guide version of their performance. I love it so much. Karina's hair. My goodness. I miss my long hair, but that's okay. I'll put a wig on, a long, nice wig that's gonna be similar and will be good. But her hair is phenomenal. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's gonna change your life. It's just like, I don't know, I enjoy that choreography so much for their song Savage. I just enjoy the choreography a lot, and I am obsessed with their new mini album. There's so many good songs, but I think that checking out Savage with the music video would be good, and then checking out Lucid Dream would be really good too if you like kind of chill bops. Like, it's lo-fi-y but with like a really nice beat. Basically a chill bop. That's what that's what I'm gonna call it, okay? That song is so good. Lucid Dream is phenomenal. Such a good song. I also couldn't resist, especially because after getting some bad news, I really can't resist after that in terms of getting something for myself. So I got an aespa album. I'll let you know which member I pull a card off. I don't know, I'm just so entertained by them. It's really, everything is so well made that it's really entertaining to watch, and it distracts me really well. So as you know, I very much appreciate it recently. And another artist I want to talk about today is this girl. I assume they're a girl, I don't know, I don't want to misgender anyone, but I'm gonna just go with they for now because I don't know their gender. But they have this new EP out called Stories from New York, and the name of the artist is BAYLI, BAYLI. Oh, there are so many good songs on this EP, and all of them are like 2 minutes something. They're really short, but they just work so well in that format, and I think that they're so great. So the songs that I'm gonna tell you that you should listen because they're so good is 16, Sushi for Breakfast, Foreigner, and Say It Back. Foreigner is so catchy, even though it's very chill. It's not very loud type of catchy song. It's more of a low-key kind of song, but it's so catchy and it makes you want to listen to it so many. Check it out. I put the name in the description so you don't have to like spell it out based on my spelling in the video where I'm literally telling you, letters or whatever. Just, it's so good. You're definitely gonna enjoy it. This is basically what I wanted to tell you about in the music section, just so you know about this artist. I don't know, it's very enjoyable to listen to both of them. I mean, I know that hyper poppy stuff like aespa is not everybody's cup of tea, but I really enjoy it. Lucid Dream is not hyper poppy, it's very chill, so if you like chill type of pop R&B sound, you're gonna like it. And same with BAYLI. This is it for today. I will see you soon in another podcast or video on the main channel. Sorry for being all over the place with the schedule for the podcast especially, but I just never know whether I'm gonna feel good on a specific day that I plan to shoot on. So it's kind of all over the place. But I'll be back soon. Bye!